For decades, François Pinault has been known as the king of French luxury, the man who turned a humble timber trading company into Kering, a global fashion powerhouse housing Gucci, Saint Laurent, and Balenciaga. He stood among the world's richest, his art collection rivaling national museums, his name whispered in Parisian high society as a symbol of refined taste and business genius. But behind the shimmering storefronts and couture gowns lies a story the public was never meant to hear, a story of calculated betrayals, ruthless takeovers, and secret political influence that blurred the line between business and power. His rise wasn't just built on creativity and risk-taking, it was fueled by deals struck in smoke, filled back rooms, discreet favors traded with politicians, and moves so aggressive they left rivals gasping. Whispers from the Paris financial district claim that Pinault's empire was partly cemented during France's most turbulent economic years, when failing companies could be picked apart at bargain prices. He didn't just buy brands, he absorbed entire legacies, sometimes against the will of their founding families. Fashion insiders speak of meetings where smiles masked ultimatums, and contracts signed under the weight of knowing resistance was futile. And then there's the art world connection. Pinault is not just a collector, he's a force who can make or break an artist's career overnight. Yet, some claim his influence has gone beyond patronage, subtly intertwining the fortunes of his brands with the cultural institutions that display his acquisitions. Few have dared to question whether this support was pure generosity or a calculated extension of his brand's dominance into the very fabric of European culture. For years, his public image remained pristine, a mix of billionaire elegance and philanthropic gestures. But an incident barely covered by mainstream media hinted at the real stakes behind his operations. In 2019, rumors circulated about a high-profile negotiation that collapsed at the last minute, costing a historic French brand its independence and sparking quiet outrage among industry veterans. Pinault never addressed it publicly, but those close to the deal describe it as a battle of egos and influence, one that revealed how far he was willing to go to protect his empire's supremacy. François Pinault has survived market crashes, political shifts, and the unpredictable tides of fashion. Yet, the untold secret of how he truly built and secured his empire, and the lengths he went to ensure it stayed intact, paints a far more complex portrait than the charming billionaire who sits front row at Paris Fashion Week. He once stood at the very top, but what happened next? Join the Hidden Billionaires to uncover his story. François Pinault was not born into the glittering world of haute couture or marble-floored boardrooms. He was born in 1936-inch Les Champs-Giroux, a small rural commune in Brittany, France. His father ran a modest timber trading business, and life in post-war France meant money was tight and opportunities scarcer still. The Pinault family's world revolved around hard work, community ties, and an almost stubborn belief in resilience, values that would quietly become the backbone of François' empire decades later. As a boy, François was restless and observant, far more interested in the movement of people and goods than in school books. He wasn't a star student. In fact, he left school early, a decision that shocked teachers and even embarrassed his family at the time. But young Pinault had already absorbed a truth many never grasp. Formal education is not the only education that matters. He had the instinct to spot opportunity and the courage to seize it, even without a diploma to his name. The family's timber business became his first stage. He learned how to negotiate with tough, weathered men twice his age, how to read the subtle signals of a buyer hesitating, and how to turn a no into a reluctant yes. In the Breton countryside, deals were sealed not with contracts but with handshakes and trust, and sometimes the kind of hard bargaining that left the other man shaking his head but grudgingly respecting you. The 1952nd and 62nd in France were years of economic reconstruction. Wood was in high demand for building projects, and Pinault quickly understood that controlling supply meant controlling the game. While other young men his age sought stable jobs, he took the risky route, expanding his family's operations, sourcing timber beyond Brittany, and leveraging relationships with sawmills and construction firms. But his ambitions were bigger than wood. He was fascinated by business stories in newspapers, tales of industrial giants, luxury houses, and political power brokers who seemed to move history with a phone call. Pinault's early exposure to business wasn't glamorous, but it gave him something more valuable, a predatory instinct for opportunity. His first major leap came when he saw a chance to buy struggling businesses at low prices, strip what was valuable, and sell at a profit. In the 1972nd, he began quietly acquiring small companies in trouble, sometimes saving them, sometimes dismantling them, always making money. This was the seed of what would later become his defining strategy, the art of acquisition. François Pinault was not the type to flash wealth or boast in public. In those early days, he dressed plainly, spoke softly, and kept his cards close to his chest. But those who dealt with him often walked away with two clear impressions. This man never forgot a favor, and he never forgave a betrayal. What's striking is how much of his later empire's DNA was formed during these years in Brittany, the emphasis on owning assets rather than just managing them, the belief in controlling not just a business, but the story around it, and the understanding that timing is everything. The timber merchant's son had no famous surname, no Parisian social network, and no elite education. What he had was patience, precision, and the willingness to play the long game traits that would one day see him face off with some of the most powerful names in luxury and win. By the late 1972nd, François Pinault had already proven himself as a shrewd operator in the timber industry, but he wasn't content with being a regional player. He understood something many entrepreneurs missed, that real power came from diversification. Timber was stable, yes, but it would never make him a titan. He needed to step into industries with higher margins, greater influence, and global reach. The first big step came in 1988 when Pinault listed his company on the Paris Stock Exchange under the name Pinault SA. This move injected fresh capital into his operations and gave him the war chest to begin acquiring companies outside of wood. His early purchases included specialty retail chains and distribution companies, small moves that seemed unrelated to fashion or luxury at the time, but in Pinault's mind they were stepping stones. Then, in 1994, he made the kind of bold move that defined his career. He acquired the French retail giant Printemps, along with a controlling stake in La Redoute, the mail-order company. Overnight, Pinault had transformed from a regional businessman into a national retail heavyweight. The French media began paying attention, and in business circles, his name started to carry weight. But the real turning point came in the late 1992nd, when Pinault decided to shift from general retail to luxury goods, a sector that offered not only astronomical profits, but also prestige. In 1999, he stunned the industry by acquiring a controlling stake in Gucci Group, wresting it from the hands of rival LVMH's Bernard Arnault in a fierce and very public corporate battle. It was the first time many outside of France truly noticed François Pinault, and the impression he left was of a man who could take on the biggest players and win. The Gucci deal wasn't just about one brand, it was a gateway. Over the next few years, Pinault added Yves Saint Laurent, Bottega Veneta, Balenciaga, and Alexander McQueen to his growing luxury portfolio. Each acquisition was strategic, each brand chosen for its cultural relevance and growth potential. In 2005, he rebranded his empire as PPR, Pinault Printemps Redoute, and then in 2013 as Kering, a name that signaled care, sustainability, and a focus on high-end fashion. What set Pinault apart from other billionaires was his ability to adapt. He didn't cling to dying markets, he exited them before they dragged him down. When he saw the retail sector weakening in the face of e-commerce, he shed non-luxury businesses and doubled down on fashion. When global tastes shifted, he allowed creative directors at his brands more freedom, creating some of the most talked about runway shows of the decade. At the peak of his climb, François Pinault wasn't just building a business, he was crafting an image. He became a regular at Paris Fashion Week, sitting front row next to celebrities and editors, yet he remained an enigmatic figure. His son, François Pinault, began to take a more visible role in the company, marrying actress Salma Hayek in 2009 and further intertwining the family name with glamour and Hollywood appeal. The French press began to paint Pinault as the quiet counterpoint to Arnault, less showy, more discreet, but no less ambitious. Behind the scenes, however, those who worked with him knew he could be just as ruthless. He was a master negotiator, and when Pinault wanted something, the odds were heavily in favor of him getting it, whether through charm, strategic alliances, or relentless pressure. By the mid-2010 second, Kering was one of the most profitable luxury groups in the world, with Gucci experiencing a creative and financial renaissance under Alessandro Michele. François Pinault's personal fortune soared into the tens of billions, and his art collection, displayed in Venice's Palazzo Grassi and Punta della Dogana, cemented him as one of the most influential figures in the art world. It seemed that the boy from Brittany had reached the summit, but in the world of high fashion and high finance, staying at the top can be more dangerous than climbing there. And for Pinault, the real test was yet to come. For all the elegance that François Pinault projected to the world, the art openings in Venice, the perfectly tailored suits in Paris, the reality of running a global luxury empire was far messier behind closed doors. The higher he climbed, the more political the air became. The first real cracks appeared not in the boardroom, but in the public conversation. By the mid-2002, investigative journalists began probing the true mechanics behind his acquisitions. Some French media outlets suggested that Pinault's timing was almost too perfect, that he somehow managed to swoop in on struggling companies just before they became irresistible assets. Was it prescient business instinct, or was there a network of inside connections feeding him opportunities before they went public? One of the most controversial moments came in the long-standing rivalry with Bernard Arnault. Their battle over Gucci in the late 1992 had already made headlines, but whispers persisted that retaliations played out in subtler arenas, art auctions, where one outbid the other at absurd prices, discreet approaches to designers already under contract, and media campaigns timed to overshadow each other's flagship events. The luxury world, usually cloaked in polite competition, became an undercurrent of veiled hostilities. But the biggest storm came from the very markets that had made him rich. In 2018, tax justice activists in France accused several major luxury conglomerates, including Kering, of engaging in aggressive tax optimization schemes, moving revenues through subsidiaries in low-tax jurisdictions. While Kering publicly maintained that it complied with all applicable laws, a high-profile investigation in Italy involving Gucci's tax practices put the group under an uncomfortable spotlight. Even though François Henry, his son, was now the official face of the company, insiders knew that any scandal attached to Kering still reflected on the patriarch who built it. There was also the personal toll. Pinault had always been intensely private, but with fame came unwanted scrutiny. His family life, especially his son's high-profile marriage to Salma Hayek, became tabloid fodder. The Pinaults, who had built their fortune in an industry dependent on image, suddenly found themselves battling to control their own. And then came the cultural backlash, the era of transparency and social responsibility. Activists criticized luxury houses for the environmental impact of fashion production, the use of exotic skins, and the pressure placed on young designers to produce constant, high-output collections. For a man whose empire was built on the allure of exclusivity, navigating a world demanding inclusivity and accountability was a new kind of challenge. François Pinault handled the public storms with the same strategy he had used in business: silence and precision. He rarely gave interviews, never engaged in public feuds, and when changes needed to be made, he made them quietly but decisively. Kering began positioning itself as a leader in sustainable luxury, banning fur, investing in traceable supply chains, and publishing environmental reports. Still, the legacy of the controversies lingered. In private, some rivals admired his resilience. Others whispered that the Pinault empire had been built on deals that would never have survived in the age of social media transparency. His reputation remained intact among art circles and the old guard of French business, but for the first time in decades, François Pinault was no longer invisible to criticism. And for a man who had built an empire by operating just out of the spotlight, this was perhaps the steepest price of all. After decades at the helm of one of the world's most influential luxury empires, François Pinault gradually began stepping back from the daily pressures of business. The transition was neither abrupt nor dramatic. It was a carefully choreographed withdrawal, a passing of the torch to his son, François-Henri Pinault, who had been groomed for leadership for years. By the mid-2010 second, François Pinault shifted his focus increasingly toward his other great passion, art. The vast private collection he had built over decades transformed from a mere hobby into a defining legacy. His Venetian museums, Palazzo Grassi and Punta della Dogana, became temples of contemporary art, drawing visitors from across the globe. Here, the billionaire was no longer the tycoon but the patron, the visionary who shaped culture as much as commerce. Despite his retreat from the public eye, Pinault's influence remained palpable. His son's leadership style echoed his own mix of discretion and decisiveness, ensuring the Kering empire continued to thrive amid changing market trends and cultural shifts. Under François-Henri, the group doubled down on sustainability, technology, and digital innovation, while maintaining the brand's aura of exclusivity and craftsmanship. Yet, François Pinault never fully vanished. He remained a quiet presence at major art auctions and industry events, a man whose reputation commanded respect and whose opinions shaped markets. Though he no longer appeared on the front pages, insiders knew his counsel was often sought behind closed doors. His personal life also took on a more contemplative tone. Away from the relentless spotlight of business, he devoted time to family and philanthropy. The Pinault Foundation expanded its reach, supporting emerging artists and cultural preservation projects. He became known for his discreet generosity, avoiding ostentation, while quietly influencing French cultural life. Interestingly, the billionaire's approach to wealth evolved. While once defined by expansion and acquisition, his later years reflected a shift toward legacy and stewardship. Unlike many billionaires who chase ever greater fortunes, Pinault seemed intent on preserving what he had built, both in business and in art, for future generations. Yet, despite this calm exterior, those close to him acknowledged that the years of intense business battles and public scrutiny left their mark. Pinault's health, once robust, reportedly faced challenges, though details remain guarded. His rare public appearances have been tinged with a sense of solemnity, a reminder that even titans must one day face their limits. For all the rumors of retirement or fading relevance, François Pinault remains a symbol of French entrepreneurial spirit, a man who built a global empire from humble roots and who continues to wield subtle influence far beyond the fashion runways. François Pinault's story is not just one of business triumph, it is also a story of family, legacy, and the delicate art of passing the baton. From the outset, Pinault understood that wealth and power are only as enduring as the family that inherits them. The Pinault family, long shielded from media glare, now plays a central role in shaping the future of the empire. His eldest son, François-Henri Pinault, emerged as the natural successor, combining business acumen with a modern vision. Educated at HEC Paris, François-Henri brought a fresh perspective that complemented his father's old-school strategies. Under his leadership, Kering expanded into digital realms and sustainability, gaining a reputation as a pioneer among luxury conglomerates. His marriage to actress Salma Hayek not only boosted the family's public profile, but also symbolized the blend of culture and commerce the Pinaults represent. Beyond François-Henri, the Pinault family remains relatively private, carefully managing their personal and professional boundaries. Unlike some dynasties plagued by public feuds, the Pinaults project an image of unity and discretion, though insiders hint at the usual tensions that accompany immense wealth and responsibility. Balancing family interests with corporate governance is a constant challenge, especially as new generations come into their own. The family's influence stretches beyond business. Through the Pinault Foundation, the family champions contemporary art and cultural preservation. It supports emerging artists and funds major exhibitions worldwide, ensuring that their legacy extends beyond commerce into the realm of creativity and philanthropy. Meanwhile, the younger generation is beginning to take tentative steps into the spotlight. François Henri's children are growing up amid luxury and art, with subtle hints that they will play roles in the family's future, whether in management, creative ventures, or philanthropy. The question remains whether they will maintain the delicate balance between tradition and innovation that has defined their predecessors. In a world where dynastic battles often end in scandal and division, the Pinault family's careful stewardship of their fortune and reputation stands out. But as the empire evolves, so too do the challenges of maintaining cohesion, adapting to changing social expectations, and navigating the complex intersection of wealth, culture, and power. François Pinault's legacy is woven deeply into the fabric of the luxury fashion world and contemporary art. He did more than build a business empire. He reshaped how luxury groups operate and defined new standards for blending commerce with culture. His pioneering strategy of transforming a timber company into a powerhouse of luxury brands forever changed the industry landscape. Kering's success demonstrated that thoughtful acquisitions combined with creative freedom could revive heritage brands and set new trends. Pinault's vision gave rise to some of the most influential fashion moments of the 21st century, driven by innovative designers supported under his empire's wing. Moreover, his influence on the art world is profound. By opening private collections to the public in Venice and funding cultural institutions, Pinault made contemporary art accessible and dynamic. His patronage elevated artists' profiles internationally and introduced a new model where business magnates actively shape cultural discourse. Museums bearing his name serve as lasting monuments to his dual passions, wealth and creativity. The lessons Pinault leaves behind are complex. On one hand, his story is an inspirational tale of ambition, adaptability, and calculated risk-taking. On the other, it's a cautionary tale about the price of power, how influence can blur lines, how private deals can shape public markets, and how the relentless pursuit of growth invites scrutiny. Experts, media, and industry insiders continue to debate his impact. Some hail him as a visionary who expanded French luxury to global heights. Others critique the opaque methods behind his rise. Still, few deny the enduring mark he left on fashion, art, and business. Decades from now, the Pinault name will likely remain synonymous with French elegance, innovation, and bold entrepreneurship. Universities and cultural awards linked to his foundation ensure that his influence will be studied and celebrated. Whether as an icon of success or a subject of controversy, François Pinault's legacy is undeniably woven into the history of global luxury. François Pinault's life story is a compelling mix of grit, vision, and secrecy. From modest beginnings in rural Brittany to the pinnacle of the luxury world, he carved out an empire that transformed industries and shaped culture. Yet, his journey also reveals the complex costs of ambition, the quiet battles behind the scenes, the blurred lines between power and influence, and the heavy toll of maintaining a public image while pulling strings in the shadows. Was he a timeless legend or a fleeting phenomenon? The answer lies somewhere in between. Pinault's ability to adapt and innovate made him a titan whose influence will ripple through generations. But the controversies and whispers remind us that behind every empire, there are untold stories of struggle and compromise. His legacy teaches us that ambition, when combined with patience and strategic boldness, can break barriers. Yet, it also warns of the dangers inherent in absolute control and secrecy, lessons especially relevant in today's world of transparency and rapid change. As François Pinault fades further into the background, replaced by a new generation bearing the family name, one question remains. Can the empire he built endure the test of time and evolving values? If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe and stay tuned for more hidden truths from the world's richest.